Welcome to Lesson 2, Intro to Java Programming. In this lesson, and in fact in all of the lessons, I'll be compiling and running Java programs just like I showed you in the Lesson 1 test drive of the Java Development Kit. However, my general approach throughout these videos will be to bring a program up on the screen inside of Microsoft's cross-platform Visual Studio Code Editor. I'll be using that to present the code to you. I will run the code sometimes directly from the Visual Studio Code Editor and sometimes by going out to the command line on Mac OS or Windows like I did back in the Lesson 1 test drive. And then we'll see how the program runs. And after I've shown you how the program runs, I'll go ahead and talk about the code that achieved those results. In this particular lesson, we're going to be working with a lot of Java fundamentals. So we'll talk about input and output statements. And input statements will enable us to bring data into a program so that we can use it as part of the program. And output statements we will use primarily to display results to the user. But as you move further into Java, you'll eventually start doing things like outputting to files, outputting to databases, or maybe even calling web services somewhere in the cloud on the internet and sending output to those web services to invoke a web service and get results back. So for example, one of the things that we do in chapter 11 of each book is invoke an open weather map web service to get a weather report and then display some of that information. We'll show you how to declare, initialize, and use variables of primitive data types. Primitive types are built into the language. Things like integers and floating point numbers have data types associated with them, and this is a strongly typed language. So anytime you need to store a piece of information in a program, you must declare what type that information has, and that helps Java understand how to process that data as well. If you are a programmer in another programming language, you'll probably see some things that are familiar to you throughout this lesson, but we'll also talk about the things that are different about Java as well. We'll show you the arithmetic operators in a table. We'll be primarily using the plus operator for demonstration purposes in one of the programs, but we'll also talk about the other arithmetic operators as well. We'll also introduce the if statement, which is one of Java's control statements that allows you to evaluate a condition and then decide whether or not to execute one or more statements based on whether that condition is true. So if an if statement's condition is true, we'll perform a task, otherwise we will not. And to test the condition, we will use relational and equality operators in Java. And again, those will be familiar to anybody who's already a programmer, and even just somebody who's familiar with algebra, you'll get a sense of how programming languages represent things like less than or equal, greater than or equal, equality and inequality. And sometimes those symbols will be the same as algebra, and sometimes they'll be slightly different, and they may differ a little bit in some languages for the equality operators in particular. Now, back in the Before You Begin lesson, I mentioned that we've integrated generative AI throughout our Java products. So one of the other things I'll do in these videos is occasionally we will jump over to generative AI public interfaces in the cloud and ask them questions or ask them to do something for us. So I'll do that throughout these videos. And then finally in this lesson we'll have the first of our Objects Natural case studies. Throughout these early lessons, one of the things we want you to be able to do is achieve significant results without having to write a tremendous amount of code. So rather than teaching you all about how to define your own custom classes in the first many lessons, we will be focusing on the language features and on using pre-existing classes throughout the Java APIs and also a couple of open source libraries as well. The very first of those Objects Natural case studies will be on the Java API's built-in class called string. Strings are pervasive throughout all of Java, so it's a good idea for us to get right into working with those from the get-go, and so we'll do that as our very first Objects Natural case study.